The locker room door opened 45 minutes before the fight, and 3 men in expensive suits walked in without knocking. No introduction. No permission. Just 3 strangers who moved like they owned the place, and everyone in it. The biggest one, a man whose reputation in boxing circles was whispered about, but never spoken aloud, sat down across from Muhammad Ali and delivered 5 words that would have sent most fighters into a panic. "You're going to lose tonight." What happened in the next 10 minutes didn't just save Ali's career. It proved that some men can't be bought, can't be threatened, and can't be controlled. Not even by the most dangerous criminals in America. This is the true story of the night Muhammad Ali faced down the mob and sent them running with nothing but his words. It was 1971, and Muhammad Ali was fighting his way back to greatness after losing everything. He had recently returned to boxing after a brutal 3-year exile for refusing military service in Vietnam. The Supreme Court had finally overturned his conviction, but the damage was done. Ali had lost 3.5 years of his prime. Years that can never be recovered in a boxer's career. He had already tried and failed to reclaim his heavyweight championship, falling to Joe Frazier in the fight of the century, just months earlier. Now, Ali was scheduled to fight a lesser opponent in what everyone knew was a tune-up bout, a fight designed to rebuild his confidence and his ranking. The opponent's name doesn't matter for this story. What matters is that certain people with connections to organized crime had bet heavily against Ali. Not because they thought he would lose, but because they had made sure he would lose. Or at least, they thought they had. The problem was simple: nobody had bothered to ask Muhammad Ali if he was willing to participate in their plan. When the 3 men walked into Ali's locker room, Angelo Dundee, Ali's legendary trainer, immediately stood up. "This is a closed locker room," Dundee said firmly. "Nobody's supposed to be in here before a fight." The biggest of the 3 men smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that had preceded violence in dark alleys and abandoned warehouses for decades. "We're not nobody," he said calmly. "We're friends of the sport, friends who make sure things run smoothly. We just want to have a conversation with the champ." Ali, who had been lying on the training table getting a rub-down, sat up slowly. At 6'3" and 215 pounds of pure muscle, Ali was an intimidating physical presence. But these men weren't impressed by athletes. They were in the business of making athletes disappear. Ali recognized the type immediately. He had been around boxing his entire adult life, and he knew that organized crime had its fingers in the sport, had for decades. Fixed fights, controlled rankings, owned fighters. It was an open secret that nobody talked about publicly, because talking about it could get you hurt, or killed. "What kind of conversation?" Ali asked, his voice steady. The man sat down, crossed his legs, and made himself comfortable. His 2 associates took positions by the door, making it crystal clear that nobody was leaving until this conversation was finished. "The kind where we make sure everybody benefits," the man said, his voice carrying the smooth confidence of someone who had never been told no. "See, champ, you're a smart guy. You understand business. And this fight tonight, it's business. Good business for everyone, if it goes the right way." Ali knew exactly what the man meant. He'd heard the stories about fighters being approached before bouts, told to take a dive in a specific round, promised money or threatened with violence. Some fighters took the deals. Others refused and paid the price. A few refused and nothing happened, because their refusal became public, and the mob didn't want that kind of attention. "What's the right way?" Ali asked, playing dumb. The man smiled again, clearly enjoying what he thought was going to be an easy negotiation. "The right way is your opponent wins tonight, maybe round 7, round 8. You take some shots, you go down, and you don't get up. You get your purse. You get to walk out healthy, and everybody who bet on your opponent makes money, including us, including you if you're smart." Angelo Dundee moved toward Ali, but Ali held up his hand. He wanted to hear all of it. "How much?" Ali asked. The man named a figure that made everyone in the room take notice. It was substantial, more than Ali's purse for the fight, though nowhere near what Ali made on his biggest bouts. But for a tune-up fight against a nobody, it was serious money. "Tax-free, cash untraceable," the man continued. "All you have to do is take a little nap in round 8. Silence filled the locker room like poisonous gas. The 2 associates by the door watched Ali carefully. Angelo Dundee looked like he wanted to say something but knew better. This was Ali's decision, and whatever Ali decided, everyone else would have to live with. The man waited, confident in his proposal. In his experience, fighters always took the deal. The money was good and the alternative was very, very bad. Nobody wanted to be the hero. Heroes got hurt. But then Muhammad Ali stood up from the training table and everything changed. At 6'3", he towered over the seated mobster. When he spoke, his voice was calm, almost conversational. But there was something underneath it. Something that made the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. "Let me ask you something," Ali said. "You know who I am?" The man laughed, clearly thinking this was going to be easy. "Of course I know who you are. You're Muhammad Ali, former heavyweight champion. That's why we're here, because you're famous. And when famous people lose, lots of money changes hands." Ali nodded slowly. "That's right, I'm Muhammad Ali." What Ali said next would change everything. "I'm the man who gave up 3.5 years of my career. 3.5 years of my prime. Because I wouldn't compromise what I believe in." The confidence on the mobster's face flickered slightly. The United States government, the most powerful government in the world, tried to make me do something I didn't want to do. They stripped my title. They took my license. They threatened me with 5 years in prison. Ali's voice grew stronger with each word. "And you know what I told them?" The man's smile had faded slightly. He sensed this wasn't going the way he'd expected. "I told them no. I told the President of the United States, the Supreme Court, the U.S. military, all of them. I told them no. I was willing to go to jail. I was willing to give up millions of dollars. I was willing to give up my career because some things matter more than money." Ali took a step closer to the man. "Some things matter more than being safe. Some things you don't compromise on, no matter who's asking. Now I don't know your name. I don't know who you work for. But I know you're not the president. You're not the Supreme Court. You're not the U.S. military." Ali's voice dropped to almost a whisper, but somehow it filled the entire room. "You're just a guy in a nice suit asking me to do something I don't want to do, and you think I'm going to say yes to you when I said no to them." The man's face had gone hard. The smile was completely gone now. "You don't understand the situation you're in," he said quietly, and for the first time, there was real menace in his voice. "This isn't the government. This isn't lawyers in courtrooms. This is different." He leaned forward, and when he spoke again, his words carried the weight of 1,000 unmarked graves. "People who say no to us, they have accidents. They have problems. Their families have problems." The threat hung in the air like a loaded gun. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about survival. But Ali didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He didn't take a single step backward. "Is that a threat?" Ali asked calmly. "Because if you're threatening me, and my family, you better understand something." What Ali said next would send chills down the spine of one of the most dangerous men in America. "I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of your friends. I'm not afraid of your organization." Ali's voice grew stronger, more powerful with each word. "You know why? Because I've been threatened by experts. I've been threatened by the FBI. I've been threatened by the U.S. government. I've had death threats from the Ku Klux Klan. I've had Nation of Islam members tell me they'd kill me for leaving the organization." Ali spread his arms wide, as if inviting attack. "And I'm still here. Still standing. Still fighting." The man was starting to look uncomfortable, but Ali wasn't finished. "You think you scare me? I've fought Sonny Liston. And Liston was scarier than you'll ever be. I've stood up to a government that wanted to put me in prison. I've walked away from millions of dollars because I wouldn't compromise my principles." Ali moved closer, and now his voice carried the power of a man who had already lost everything and discovered he was still standing. "And you think I'm going to throw a fight because you showed up in my locker room with 2 guys and some threats about my family?" The man stood up, his face flushed with anger and something else. Something he wasn't used to feeling. Uncertainty. He wasn't used to being talked to like this. In his world, when he made these kinds of visits, people said yes. They were afraid. They took the money. They did what they were told. But Ali wasn't afraid, and the man could see it in his eyes. This wasn't an act. Ali genuinely didn't care about the threat. "You're making a mistake," the man said, but his voice had lost its conviction. Ali shook his head. "No, you're making a mistake. You walked into the wrong locker room. You tried to buy the wrong fighter. I don't work for you. I don't work for the mob. I don't work for anybody except myself and Allah. And neither one of us is telling me to lose this fight." Ali moved closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. but somehow more powerful than if he had been shouting. Let me tell you what's going to happen. You're going to walk out of this locker room right now. You're going to go back to whoever sent you, and you're going to tell them that Muhammad Ali said no. You're going to tell them that they bet on the wrong horse. And you're going to tell them that if they ever send anyone into my locker room again, I won't just say no. What Ali said next would haunt organized crime for years to come. I'll make it very public. The words hit the mobster like a physical blow. I'll call a press conference. I'll tell the whole world that the mob tried to fix my fight. I'll tell them about this conversation. I'll tell them about your threats against my family. The man's eyes widened slightly. For the first time, he looked genuinely scared. And then where will you be? Ali's threat landed with devastating precision. The last thing organized crime wanted was public attention, especially from someone as famous as Muhammad Ali. If Ali went public with accusations of fight fixing, there would be investigations, congressional hearings, media firestorms. The heat would be unbearable. You wouldn't, the man said, but his voice lacked conviction. Ali smiled for the first time since the conversation began. Try me. I went to war with the US government and won. You think I'm afraid to go to war with you? I've got nothing to lose. I've already lost everything once and came back. But you've got a lot to lose. Ali's voice grew quieter, more dangerous. So here's what we're going to do. You're going to leave now, and we're never going to have this conversation again. Because if we do, I promise you, the whole world is going to hear about it. Angelo Dundee had moved to stand beside Ali. Two more of Ali's team had appeared in the doorway behind the mobsters, drawn by the commotion. The balance of power in the room had shifted completely. The man looked at Ali for a long moment, calculation in his eyes. He was weighing options, considering consequences. Finally, he nodded slightly, a gesture that might have been respect or might have been admission of defeat. You're either the bravest man I've ever met, he said quietly, or the stupidest. Ali's smile widened. I've been called both. Usually I'm both at the same time, but I'm always honest, and I always keep my word. So when I tell you I'll go public if this happens again, you'd better believe me. The man adjusted his jacket and signaled to his associates. As they moved toward the door, he stopped and looked back at Ali. What he said next shocked everyone in the room. For what it's worth, he said, and there was genuine respect in his voice, I hope you win tonight. There was no irony in his voice. No sarcasm, it sounded completely genuine. Then the three men were gone, the door closing behind them. They had come into the locker room thinking they were going to buy a fighter. Instead, they had met a man who couldn't be bought at any price. Angelo Dundee let out a breath he'd been holding. Do you know what you just did? He asked Ali. Ali shrugged and lay back down on the training table. I just told some guys I'm not going to throw a fight. Same thing I've been telling people my whole life. Nobody owns me. Nobody controls me. Not the government, not the mob. Nobody. They could come back, Dundee said nervously. They could wait for you outside. They could. Ali cut him off. They won't. You know why? Because I meant what I said. If anything happens to me, everyone will know who did it. And the mob doesn't want that kind of attention. Ali closed his eyes, completely relaxed. They're businessmen. Bad business is when everyone's looking at you. They'll leave me alone. That night, Muhammad Ali went out and destroyed his opponent. It wasn't close. It wasn't competitive. Ali boxed brilliantly, moving like a man reborn, fighting with the freedom that only comes from doing the right thing. In the 8th round, ironically, the same round where he'd been told to take his dive, Ali knocked his opponent out cold. After the fight, a reporter asked Ali if he'd had any trouble preparing for the bout. No trouble at all, Ali said, smiling that famous Ali smile. Just had to remind some people who I am and what I stand for. The story of the mob visit to Ali's locker room didn't become public for years. Those who were there kept quiet, partly out of respect for Ali, partly out of fear of what might happen if they talked. But eventually, the story leaked out, as these stories always do. Angelo Dundee confirmed it in interviews later in his life. Others who were there, whose names are still sometimes kept private, corroborated the details. What makes this story remarkable isn't just that Ali refused the mob's demand. Other fighters had refused before, though not many. What makes it remarkable is how Ali refused. He didn't just say no, he turned the tables. He made the mobster understand that threatening Ali wasn't like threatening other fighters. Ali had already proven he couldn't be intimidated by anyone, including the most powerful government on earth. Why would he be intimidated by the mob? There's a lesson in that moment in the locker room that goes beyond boxing and beyond organized crime. It's about knowing who you are. It's about having principles that you won't compromise, no matter who's asking you to compromise them. Ali had drawn his lines years earlier when he refused military service. Once you've given up millions of dollars and risked prison for your beliefs, once you've stood up to that kind of pressure, nothing else can move you. The mob represented everything Ali had fought against his entire life: corruption, intimidation, the idea that everything has a price. By refusing their demand, by threatening to expose them publicly, Ali proved something that transcended sports. He proved that integrity isn't just a word. It's a choice you make in moments when it's difficult, when it's dangerous, when it would be so much easier to just go along. The man who visited Ali's locker room that night learned something that the US government had already learned: Muhammad Ali couldn't be bought, couldn't be intimidated, and couldn't be controlled. You could strip his title, take his license, threaten him with prison, show up with mob muscle and veiled threats against his family. None of it mattered. Ali was going to do what Ali believed was right, consequences be damned. That's what made him the greatest. Not just his skill in the ring, though that was extraordinary. Not just his speed and power and intelligence as a fighter, though all of that was world class. What made Ali the greatest was his absolute refusal to compromise who he was for anyone. The mob learned that lesson the hard way, in a locker room 45 minutes before a fight, when they walked in thinking they were going to buy a fighter, and walked out having met a man who couldn't be bought at any price. They never came back. Because sometimes the most powerful weapon you can have isn't your fists, it's the courage to look evil in the eye and say one simple word: no. That's what made Muhammad Ali truly the greatest of all time.